Hello, everyone. Welcome to the IPython Jupyter Dev Meeting for Thursday, November 6th. Today, Fernando is down, I think he's in Brazil right now at PyCon down there. But we are having our meeting as usual. And on the agenda today is, let's see here, development meetings.
And the first thing on the agenda is the backport of NB Format 4.
Okay.
So I've done a review pass. It seems straightforward.
Well, I realized that failure you just saw. I should add that to the PR. The fix for that and figure out what's going on in Windows. But yeah, it's just dropping in at v4 into NB format, and then removing validation because all the validation code is new in IPython 3 as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so it won't validate, but
right.
it will be able to at least read NB format 4.
Yeah, and because of the nice stuff that John did with the reader, basically all I had to do was drop in v4 and then add the key in reader, and then current.reads would open a v4 notebook as a v3 notebook, and everything would be fine. Okay,
and then what format are those notebooks saved in?
v3. It only writes v3.
Okay, so if you open a v4 notebook in v3, you'll get a v3 notebook, and if you open it back in IPython 3.0, you'll get back to a 4. Notebook.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. As far as all of our outside of NB format, all of our consumers of NB format require the notebook format to be current.
Okay, I think that totally makes sense. And cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we can. There's a Jenkins thing that Thomas and I will work out after the meeting, but after that we can merge that one. And then should we do what should we do about an IPython 2 release with the v4?
I think we should.
I'd give it at least a couple of weeks for little things like someone found a Unicode issue, but
yeah, I mean it may make sense to time that, not exactly on top of, but fairly close to that, the IPython 3 release.
Okay, so don't do it while the people sitting on master.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, and if it looks like IPython 3 is not going to come out for a longer period of time, then we could think about waiting a few weeks and do it. But let's see how it goes, and
we're knocking off the big things. There was kind of, since we only had big hard things left when we started making the Trello boards and stuff, it looked like we weren't really making progress. But we've knocked off the terminals, NB format, like a lot of the big things.
Yeah.
I think we just got a notification that one of the workers just went down. But fortunately, there are 5 now. So capacity just went from 2,500 to 2,000. All right. Hopefully it will stay. I won't have to leave the meeting to deal with that.
Yeah. If we start getting notifications that more of them are going down, then.
All right. Well, all right. That's slightly nerve-wracking, but I'm glad I got notified. That's kind of fun.
How are you guys doing the load balancing?
So in the simplest, in the simplest possible way. Maybe we should spend a couple minutes to talk about the nature demo.
Yeah, no, I'd love to hear an update on the deployment side of it. And
so unfortunately, Kyle is in transit between Arizona and Texas right now. But he and Ash Wilson and nature folks. 2 just went down. Okay.
Yeah, that was the same one again.
Oh, was it? I heard B second time, D the first time, but
I think it was B both times.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Do you have like an audible alarm or something?
Yeah, no, it actually says in words. I used the say command. Say Morning. Oh, we're going to hear that every minute. I just realized. I should maybe pause that warning guy. Yeah, so we've got the TempNB service from Jupyter TempNB standing up with a Nature notebook. We can, if someone wants to find the link for the Nature demo. And so Nature has this article talking about notebooks and reproducibility and whatnot, and they embed in an iframe then an instance of TempNB, and that will spin up notebooks in Docker containers for their users, and they get called pretty aggressively. They get called every 10 minutes. Containers that have been idle for at least 2 minutes get called. And one TempNB instance has a capacity of 512 simultaneous users, and it just shows a "sorry, we're full" page if they're all occupied. And we had there was a spike. Was unclear why. It might have been Hacker News or something. I think Kyle suspects Hacker News. At around 2, so I started. We had. You can ask TempNB how many slots are available. So I wrote a script to. The thing that's giving me the warnings is I have a script that polls that API to say how many slots are available, and then I started getting warnings as the occupancy started going up real fast, and I asked Kyle what the plan was for if 512 is not enough, and there kind of wasn't one. So at first we tried to just tear it down and bring it back up with larger capacity. That did not go well. And then so we threw together a redirect. So Kyle just spun up multiple copies of TempNB and put them on different domains. So there's Nature A, Nature B, Nature C, Nature D, and Nature E. And then there's just another service that's now sitting at nature.tempNB that pulls all the independent instances for their current occupancy, and then does a simple weighted assignment. So all it does is, it's just, at nature.tempNB is just a service that does nothing but 302.
Okay, so just redirects.
It doesn't, yeah. So it's a load balancer in this, but it's kind of the dumbest kind of load balancer because it requires all of your instances to be on public domains.
Yeah, no.
So rather than a traditional like HA proxy or branch-based load balancer that sits in and then transparently assigns requests.
Yeah.
It says, it's more of a dispatcher thing.
Yeah,
says, no, not me. You actually want this guy. And
yeah. No.
And that, so we couldn't add capacity to TempNB itself, but we can add and remove whole TempNB instances to the redirector.
Yeah.
All right.
No, that's pretty cool. I mean, originally when we talked to Nature about this demo, they thought 200 concurrent users was the absolute maximum that they would ever possibly see, and so that's why we didn't initially think about scaling beyond that. And it's a nice problem to have, though, that
And it sits pretty consistently. So since we never actually had more than 512 users.
Okay.
Because whatever spike it was that ran right into the wall, we would have. But whatever spike it was that ran right into the wall was over by the time we had more capacity than that.
Yeah.
And it's hovered pretty consistently between 150 and 200 concurrent users. Although this morning it's been closer to 300 or 400.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's.
But I looked at the stats, and the vast majority of sessions.
Yeah.
Is less than 10 seconds.
Okay.
So people are spinning up. They're clicking the link and saying, "Oh, what's this?"
Yeah. Ah, it's a notebook.
Yeah, either, oh, it's a notebook, I don't, whatever, or they're saying, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah. No, and honestly, that's consistent with how people use the internet. I mean,
Yeah.
we I mean, I would say actually having it open for 10 seconds is very reasonable. That's cool. No, thanks for the update. It's a great experiment for us to see, like, what does it look like to run this on the open internet and have traffic spikes. And I did a couple times. I've logged on myself and just tried playing around with the notebook to see what the performance looks like, and drag sliders around, and it's beautiful. I mean, I've never run into things being sluggish from that side. So
Yeah, I don't know if it's the resource limiting or what, but I did just on the dashboard click start a cluster. And all the containers aren't isolated. They may have CPU rationing, but they don't have virtual CPUs or anything, so they see 24 CPUs. So if you click start a cluster, it'll start a 24 engine cluster.
okay, do they?
And it didn't start.
No, I was going to say I've tried that before and it's not worked, and I think there was some.
I don't know, but it doesn't succeed in starting.
No, that's. I'm guessing it's some sort of sub-process spawning limits that are set up in the containers.
Could be.
Yeah. Cool. No, it's fantastic. Thanks so much for working on that, Min. And yeah, obviously, thank you, Kyle, who's not here today. But
It's Kyle and Ash and Matthias talking too.
Okay, cool. So, other on the agenda, actions. Oh, Matthias is not here though.
Yeah, that's true.
But let's look at it here. So there's two.
Yes, I kind of pushed on the agenda as what are we doing about this? Is this something we're going to try and land before 3.0?
I think in principle it is. I mean, I don't think it's something that we have to have in 3.0 for any particular reason. I mean, it would be nice, but I think at this point it's a matter of just pushing it through. And then so what's the 6700? Okay, so he has split this into multiple pull requests. So I think there's a bunch of code level, implementation level review that has to happen. I think the big thing that I had brought up before was that our method names on the various JavaScript objects are not particularly uniform in terms of their conventions. And when Matthias started to pick action names, the uniformity decreased even further. Basically, he started to invent new naming schemes that diverged and went in different directions. And I think because these shortcuts really become like a public API, I think we do want to pause long enough to come up with a consistent, uniform naming scheme.
Okay.
That's the only place where I don't think we should rush on this pull request, because our JavaScript APIs right now are not really public, although people use them in a public way. But I think these shortcuts definitely are meant to be public, and so we just want to, So I don't know. We probably want to have others around when we have that discussion, though. At least Matthias, if not Kyle and Fernando and other people. But I don't know. Any other Thomas, any other aspects of that that you think we should talk about today?
No, not particularly. I just wanted to get a feel of where that was, where it was going, because I feel like it's been sitting there for a while, not really moving forwards.
Yeah, it just needs the review and then the discussion of the naming convention.
And Matthias will be pretty much offline for the next 10 days, I think.
Okay.
I think he's traveling.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's just on hold until he's back online.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, unless we want to do a review and then make a PR against his PR or something. Okay. REST API for front end. Oh, right.
So this is another kind of, this time it's my own pull request, but again, I'm just kind of, it's been sitting there open for a while and not really making much progress. I mean, front-end config is certainly something that we want and have wanted for a long time. Do we feel like this is a reasonable approach to it?
do you want to describe it?
So
briefly?
it's a very straightforward REST API. I just added a new /config/section endpoint, and you can put, I believe, and patch to retrieve, send, and update config. My idea is that it's all done as JSON and it's stored as JSON as well. My idea is that a section would roughly correspond to a page of the application, like the dashboard page or the notebook page. So it would be able to retrieve whatever config it needs in a single REST API call, and then if any config things that there is an interactive interface to change, it would send a patch request to update it.
Okay. So it can do partial updates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Patch basically corresponds to dictionary.update.
Okay.
With special treatment of null for deletion of keys.
Okay.
And it's a recursive update, so you can have config nested at arbitrary levels.
Yeah. It maps. It's the granularity of the REST API is pretty much the same as it is in our config files.
Okay.
Right? So you do like /config/notebook, and then in that it's the same structure as our regular config of like object. The top level is a dict, and its values are all also dicts. So like you would have.
Well, it's up to. Oh yeah, I see. The top level is what I'm calling the section names,
which is
and
coincidentally not what our config objects call section names, but.
And then there is you send a REST API request, you get a dictionary, and that dictionary can contain arbitrary stuff, and it's up to the front end to know what its config values mean. So it's also usable by extensions, because if the extension can just have a config section named after the extension, and
so
know what to do with that.
So I think the implementation of the RESTful web API is, it's a pretty simple REST API. I think most of my questions are related to the the mapping of config to the conceptual mapping of config to pages and objects, and also especially as we think about breaking up our repo into multiple sub-projects. So for example, if widgets become a separate project, how do we, I mean, we're going to have to figure out what happens to the config system on the Python side when we do that. And I think there may be similar questions related to that for
well, this is
the JavaScript.
This is strictly easier in terms of splitting up the repository, because I mean the kernel doesn't need to know anything about this.
Well, but so for example, obviously the notebook config that makes sense to be in wherever the config information for the notebook is. But if we want this to be a general sort of an arbitrary HTTP endpoint that anyone can talk to, are we saying that for example, the widget configuration would be in a widget-specific directory, but then on the Python side, but in the JavaScript side, the JavaScript stuff is part of the notebook config? I don't know. I don't know the answers. I'm just posing the questions, and I don't know them.
It doesn't immediately feel like widget config makes sense as a thing.
Well, but I mean, but I think the idea that the thing that you're pitching here is that anything can and should persist config using this REST API. Anything being third parties, our own projects, right? I mean that's.
I mean anything. Anything that's kind of relevant to the notebook application. So like I'm planning to use it for my citation extension, for example, to store a Zotero user key.
So, but here, so then my question is, as we move towards a more modular approach, how do we handle the fact that individual components may appear on multiple pages? So, for example, the content manager may need to be configured on both the dashboard page and on the notebook page. Or, I mean,
the content manager from the JavaScript point of view is an API, so I'm not sure how much configuration it needs. But I mean, my rough plan for things that are needed on more than one page is that each page has a dashboard config, notebook config. There is a general config, common config that all the pages can load.
So yeah, so every page requests at least 2 configs.
Okay, so it's similar to how we do our Python.
It's identical to how we do it.
No, it's just these abstractions that and then so in this context, the quote page is equivalent to the config file abstraction.
Yeah, more or less. So it's a little bit more granular, a little bit smaller grain size, because you're going to have notebook config, dashboard config, possibly terminal config, possibly text editor config, possibly I don't know what else, extension, config file for each extension. So it's a bit more. They're a bit more specific than our current config files, but it's the same kind of idea.
Okay, and then when you request a particular config section or page or whatever you're calling it, you get back a dictionary, and the keys in that dictionary are sort of like object names. I mean, they don't have to be object names, but that's the basic idea.
Yeah, that's at least how we will use them.
Okay, and then the values are the attribute names attached to those objects. So it's mapping onto sort of the basic idea of our Python config system.
Yes, I wouldn't actually do the thing we do with the Python config system of config keys being automatically generated from object names and attribute names, because I think that's
but the basic namespace of each configurable object has a config namespace.
Okay, and then
have a looser coupling of what's actually configured from the key in the config namespace.
Okay, and then I guess this pull request doesn't address the question of how our JavaScript objects use this config information.
No, I've been starting to think a bit about that and how I would expose this as a JavaScript API. I want to look into the promises stuff as well for loading it, because presumably we don't necessarily want to hold up the entire page load while it does 2 more REST API calls to retrieve its config. So I've been thinking about how we can do that asynchronously. But yes, I would roughly have a config object which represents this and fetches its data from the back end.
So a JavaScript object that manages this API.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I think if we thinking about making our components more modular, so notebook, terminal, text editor, contents manager, that as people start to deploy those components in different combinations, so maybe someone has a page with a terminal and a text editor, or a notebook and a terminal. It's not exactly clear to me how we'll map that onto these config sections. I'm not sure that, I think we can just figure that out as we go along and evolve it. I guess the only thing I'm trying to think about is what are we committing to moving forward with this approach, in terms of are we basically what will break as we try to change things in the future because of introducing this. And I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, this PR itself, I think, commits us to very little, because it's a super generic layer. Really, all it's doing is storing and retrieving JSON.
Yeah, because the API that our objects need to deal with is the config object.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter where the config comes from.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, because if you load it from 10 different files but they're all going to update the same config.cell namespace.
And is this so 2 questions? One, where are these JSON blobs stored?
At present, they are, I guess exactly how I named them, but they are stored in the profile directory, the same place that we store our Python config files.
Okay, and then is it written in a way that, like all of our other web services, where there's the handlers and there's a separate manager object that has an abstract API that could be implemented to store things in different backends? Or
it's not, to be honest. It's so easy to implement the handlers that I didn't bother to provide another level of abstraction. We could easily pull that out later if it's.
That's fine. Yeah. No. Okay.
Yeah, because the manager objects we have, they're there to encapsulate. Well, they serve one or both of 2 purposes: to encapsulate, to make writing the handlers easier, because there's a bunch of reusable
Yeah.
There are a bunch of methods we call that, and the second is if you have an abstraction layer that needs to be swapped out, like file storage.
Yeah.
But
no, until we have n equals 2, we can keep it like this.
Yeah. And I don't think we need config file storage to be an abstractable thing. I don't think because the server side config is not. I don't think that's important. And if the handlers are easy to write, then the first problem doesn't exist either. So.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Would this API ever be extended to the ability to manipulate like our Python config? Like, is this at all related to that, or just a completely separate config system?
I've just pulled out my headphone jack.
Sorry, did my question startle you?
It's a completely separate system. I mean, it doesn't have the notion of alternative loaders that the Python config system has. You
could use it to write. Like if you use this to write, IPython notebook config.json, so you could actually do that. But I think.
So actually, restart the server or somehow like.
Yeah. So I'm not sure it's going to make sense to edit server config.
Yeah.
From the front end, because you need to kill the server to load it.
Yeah.
Well, you could do kernel config.
Yeah, but I don't think, since that's IPython specific, that's not something that this notebook server is going to be aware of.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very true.
I mean, you could do it like a server. You know how, some of these web applications, you configure it, or like your router. If you change settings on your router, you configure it, and then you click apply, and it reboots your router. It's like
we could do that. I've actually, in writing the Jupyter Hub stuff with all its state living in a tiny database, the fact that I can kill and restart Jupyter Hub and servers, all of those are fine, and it knows where they are, and everything is fine.
I mean,
restart the notebook server and keep and preserve all of the kernels.
Yeah.
But we may never do that.
Yeah. So is there anything that will prevent the confusion of these JSON files with Python config JSON files? Or are they literally stored next to each other, or
they are literally stored next to each other at the moment? I think. Can you go to that PR? I think I picked the naming scheme in such a way that it will never be.
Yeah, it's like NB underscore.
Okay, no,
the names don't look the same.
Great.
I mean,
no,
it wouldn't make a huge difference for it to be in the.
Yeah,
to put them in a subdirectory.
It could be.
As long as they're segmented somewhere.
Yeah. If that's preferred.
Yeah.
I just implemented something.
I might have ever so slight preference to put them in like a NB config or front end config or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think moving forward, and obviously that this is going to take the repos to split and a lot of other changes, but I do think we want to imagine a more modular setup where each of our components is much more loosely coupled to each other. And so, for example, someone could say, I want to start this server and I want the notebook component, the text editor component, the contents manager component, and the config REST API component. And to be able to sort of assemble those building blocks in flexible ways. And so eventually I think we'll have to think about, okay, how are those abstractions reflected in the profiles versus the config? But I'm fine with us moving forward with this. It's something we've needed for a really long time.
Yeah, though I would note on that kind of pick and mix thing is that some of those depend on other of those bits. Like I think it's perfectly reasonable to say you can't run the notebook interface without running the config REST API.
Yeah. Or the contents manager. Absolutely. No, that there's.
Well, you will be able to do it without the contents manager because you'll be able to use the Google Drive contents manager, but
not a contents manager.
Yeah. But that one doesn't need any service. I suppose it needs very small server-side pieces.
Yep.
Okay. I think.
So, just like going back for a moment, what's the quick poll preference subdirectory versus just putting them in there with a nvconfig name?
I'd have a slight preference for in a directory because I don't love having files that the machine reads and writes next to files that human reads and writes.
Yeah.
But I don't have a strong preference.
I'm in the same position. It's a weak preference towards that.
I think it's a little crazy to have two config systems for one.
They're two different. They're two config systems for two different.
I know, but
language.
To like a naive user, it's like the IPython notebook, and then there's two config systems. I understand we need it, but I mean, isn't that kind of a little weird?
Well, the difference is that you don't write these config files. Like for the side stuff, you write a config file, you edit it, you change things.
Yeah.
And for this, as far as the user is concerned, you don't even know that this config exists. You're checking boxes and.
I think, and this is where Matthias, and he's a fan of JSON config on the Python side. I mean, I think it's worth keeping in mind that eventually these two things might converge in different ways. I don't think we have to do that now, but I mean, the two config systems store exactly the same type of information. The scope of the files is sort of similar. The overall idea of the keys and the values are the same. So I don't know.
Yeah. The one thing that is, I think, very different is that you could auto-generate a traits UI config pane from the IPython config stuff.
Yeah.
Because we've got all the type information.
Yeah, obviously.
And I don't think we should build traits in JavaScript. So it's the front-end config will always be a simpler. Right, we're not going to get we're not going to build type annotations so that we can auto-generate a config pane based on the configurable values. We're not going to. I really hope we don't try to build that.
Tell us how you really feel about that, Min.
So that's where I think those two diverge.
Absolutely.
Is that all the information we have baked into the config system on the Python side means we can generate the default config. We could generate a GUI for writing config.
Absolutely.
We can, and I don't think we're ever going to generate the UI.
Yeah.
For the front end config.
Yeah. But then, kind of the flip side of that is the Python config system. At least while we are using executable files, it's very hard to have anything like a GUI dialog where you can modify and save config, because it gets hopelessly confusing for the user how that interacts with the config files they write. Whereas a declarative format like JSON, it is reasonable to have some kind of interface that can edit and then save config other than a text editor.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, part of the reason the type checking is so important on the Python side is that humans are writing and editing these files by hand. If it's a user interface that is editing the config, the user interface can enforce the proper, it can do all that checking.
Mhm.
But,
So,
yeah.
I mean, we still probably will have some kind of about config like thing where you can edit all the values in a very simple interface.
Yeah. So John, I mean, this is sort of a related question. Did I see that you found a way that JavaScript can actually do properties now?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Wow. So we could write traits for JavaScript then. I don't think we should, but sorry, man.
You're hurting me.
We won't do that. I don't think that's a.
Yeah, but I think that's the main thing where the two things diverge and are naturally separate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that I mean, in some ways it's an implementation detail, but it's a big one.
Yeah. No, and also the importance of the being able to auto-generate command line help and doc strings and all that automation that we get on the Python side is very different in JavaScript. It's not something that's nearly as important.
Right.
All right. So, anything else with that?
No, I think I spotted that needs a rebase, so I will do that, and then hopefully that can move forwards.
Okay. So, widget promises. Promises.
How's that going, John?
The PR will be done by the end of the week.
So how I mean, at the mini dev meeting, we were thinking no on promises, but now yes on promises?
Promises with polyfill.
Yeah. Yeah. The I think it's just the right abstraction to use for the problem that we have. There are a lot of places where you get you have like I don't know what the right word is, like a list of promises, and you need to satisfy all of them. And that's a lot easier to do with promises than something like callbacks. That would be really horrendous with a bunch of callbacks, and you'd have to like figure out which callbacks go in what order and keep a list of all the callbacks that you have, right?
You'd end up essentially reinventing promises.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Then that's a fantastic like test.
Yeah, and with things like polyfills, right? Since it lets us increase the size of an install, but it means it doesn't change the browser support or anything.
Yep.
So what is a polyfill?
Polyfill is what the web dev community calls, I don't know, maybe other communities use it, but it's like, this feature is new in HTML5. Here is a library you can use so that you can use that API on, depending on the nature of it, on browsers that don't support it yet. So basically, it implements that feature on browsers that don't, and just uses the browser native
What the rest
version.
of us would call backport.
Yeah.
So is there something we're shipping in components?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now I was looking at using RSVP, which is a superset of the EM6 Promise API. But I talked to Jason earlier, and I think I'm going to use a stricter one-to-one mapping. There's a trimmed down version of it.
Okay.
One-to-one mapping, so we'll probably use that instead.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're using the text encoder API that's new-ish that some browsers don't have. I think Safari 6 maybe. Tech is for text encoding. Lets you go from text to binary data. So that polyfill is in components now for the binary WebSocket stuff.
Okay. And then do you think, after your experience with this, John, do you think that promises are something that we want to start to use elsewhere for asynchronous JavaScript code?
I do.
Okay.
But I mean, so they're really clean. They're really easy to use. They enable you to do things that are much more complex than you could do with callbacks.
Right. So do you think something like our new JavaScript Contents Manager should use promises?
Yeah, if there's any asynchronous.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it'll all be asynchronous.
Oh, asynchronous. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a REST API with callbacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
then
so
I
great.
think
So
that would be great.
as long as we're all on board with this moving forward, let's do it. I mean, that sounds fantastic, and if it, I mean, callback driven asynchronous code is not particularly pleasant. So
I'll open an issue about the contents manager stuff and ping tester because any API changes we're making to contents manager, we need to loop the Google guys in so that we can make sure that it stays in sync with Google Drive.
And I think we may want to wait till the widget promise stuff lands, because then I'll have the library components branch.
I think that's appropriate.
yeah. Okay, this is great. I'm thrilled that.
So there is like one downside to promises, but I mean the same problem exists with callbacks.
Yeah.
They are a major pain in the ass to debug. So there's some kind of typo or something. I don't know. Something's wrong in my PR.
What are you talking about? Debugging async code is never a pain.
It's really bad, and so I've luckily it's given me the opportunity to give some tender love and care to our JavaScript testing framework. So I've improved like a lot of stuff with the error output, and I've also added an interact command to the JavaScript testing framework. So in the middle of a test, you can type interact, and it will halt the test, and then you can interact with the remote Phantom browser. Because there were things that were happening in the test that I could just not reproduce, like running the same code, and I think like with the promises, it's really sensitive to timing, and that kind of stuff can expose problems if the promises are done incorrectly, which something is incorrect in my implementation. So.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Related to JavaScript tests. So.
Are you sure it's a question and not a statement?
Or pitchfork with.
I have a request of John.
Yeah.
You have gotten Slimer to run on Travis.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I tried briefly last week to get Slimer to run on Travis and failed. The reason I tried briefly to get Slimer to run on Travis was I want to drop support for Tornado 3 because there are some important changes to WebSockets.
Yeah.
And
one of the important changes being that it doesn't support the same version of
one of the
that Phantom uses.
One of the less important, one of the changes that we don't rely on, but that they made was dropping support for the ancient draft spec of WebSockets that was never finalized. Unfortunately, this is the version of WebSockets still implemented in Qt WebKit,
Which is Phantom.
Which is
in Qt4.
Qt4 WebKit. So
is it possible to compile Phantom with Qt?
The next release of Phantom will use Qt5. It's in active branches, but there's no ETA on release. So I'm fine with Phantom on Qt5, although at this point I'm not sure I'm fine with Qt WebKit at all, given that if it's going to stagnate for years, like Qt4 did, it probably will result in the same pain. But so if we want to drop Tornado 3 support, it means we need to drop Phantom support. And right now, Phantom's the only thing we can run on Travis.
The test. Yeah. So when I did get Slimer working, I don't know if you remember, but it was a solid week adventure, I think. It took like a couple days. Like, it was really horrendous. But it turned out that the repository that we were getting our Casper stuff from was either jerry-rigged, or that guy made some little hacks in his code, or it's just a really old version. So I had to use different repositories
Oh,
I
you did.
downloaded.
Okay, you had to use a different Casper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was like the crux of the
Okay.
problem.
That is probably maybe I'll. So do people?
Do
Should
people
I?
use Slimer the time?
How do people feel about not about dropping support for Tornado 3? The Tornado 4 is quite recent. It was like July.
That's easy to upgrade.
But it's relatively easy to upgrade, and it's I don't know.
I don't know. That maybe
It's pure Python. It does try to install a compiled optimization dependency that it's like simple JSON. It'll try to compile and work fine if it fails.
So I mean, how painful is it for us to just wait until Phantom supports the new Qt?
So there are all these workarounds. So in the main thing, the main change is that is relevant to how our code works is that there's WebSocket handler now extends the vanilla request handler. So the logic, so there's actually a regular request handler.get that fires first.
Okay.
Which means that we can use regular cookie auth.
Ah, yay! So simple.
And we can use regular like Tornado coroutines to do async things, and we use both of those in order to check the kernel info to do adaptation, message spec adaptation before opening the WebSocket.
Yeah.
So the way we do it right now is that we actually call self.get from, when we're in Tornado 3, we call self.get from open, and we cannot wait on it. So you can't make open a coroutine on Tornado 3.
Yeah.
So the reason it made it a coroutine is it means we can wait for a kernel info reply before opening the WebSocket.
Yeah.
And we can, on Tornado 3, we start the coroutine, but we do not wait for it. So there's a race condition on kernel info that we cannot avoid on Tornado 3.
Yeah.
Also, I get the other part of this is that supporting, because we need like extra code for do this if it's on Tornado 3, do this if it's on Tornado 4. That is right in the middle of authenticating WebSockets.
So yeah, so it's very easy to accidentally break
if you can
break security on Tornado 3 and not notice because nobody uses Tornado 3.
So it's a decent amount of pain.
Yeah, no, it hurt me a lot last week.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it would be great if we could drop Tornado 3 then. I mean that's exactly the type of pain and complexity that you don't want in that particular location in the code.
Very much so. And I probably wouldn't have made the changes had I known that this was a Tornado 4 thing. I probably would have waited, but had I noticed. But they are such a great improvement.
Yeah. So basically, we have to, using Tornado 4 has two effects. One, people are just going to have to upgrade to Tornado 4, which I'm not too worried about.
Yep.
And then the second is that we need to transition our test suite to Slimer.
Yeah, and that it's only Travis, right? Because I'm using Tornado 4 locally, I run the test with Slimer locally. So it's not.
Oh, so Slimer already works.
We already support Slimer. It's just getting Slimer to run on Travis with Casper. Apparently, it's with Casper that's the problem. So I'll look into that.
Yeah, I mean, if
we already support Slimer. That's not a problem.
Okay, then yeah. I mean, I think mean, paying off technical debt like that is pretty nice.
Yeah, Min, if you look at the original PR where I added the Slimer,
Yeah, I did. I was looking there, but I didn't.
Oh, okay.
I
That's
didn't
a good
see the
start.
Casper stuff, but I'll look again for that.
Yeah, crap. I might have dumped the commit completely. I can also dig around if you want, see if I can find the original stuff that worked.
Yeah, I might ping you.
Yeah.
If I'll poke around myself for just
Yeah.
a little bit, but I might ping you if I can't find anything. Okay, single file editor, Thomas?
So, yes, this was kind of the next thing for me to work on once the contents manager JS stuff got merged. Min's still working, revising some details of the contents API, but I decided that we don't need to wait on that for the text editor. So, yeah, I've gone ahead and made a start on implementing a very simple text editor. It is, as we said, literally just a great big code mirror area and a save button. The basics are working. You can load, you can edit, you can save.
And are you using the JavaScript Contents Manager, or has that not been merged yet?
No, that has been merged.
So
that has been merged.
Yeah, there's going to be some tweaks to the API, which I think we're going to talk about up next on the agenda. But yeah, that has landed.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, I
like how small this is so far. That makes me happy.
Yeah, it will probably have to get a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I know, but
yeah, so far it is literally just like load this file, stick it in Code Mirror, and you click save, send it back to the server.
Okay.
Oh, and I have enabled the Code Mirror search replace add-on.
Okay. Are we using the more of the approach that John's kill the pager request does, where the whole page scrolls rather than just a div?
I don't know. I assume so. I haven't done anything clever with layout myself. It is very literally put a big code mirror area on the page. Like, there is a div, and I say, code mirror, make yourself a code mirror thing in this div. That is pretty much all what I do.
Okay, so you don't currently have like the site header or a menu bar or things that are fixed.
No, those are there.
There's the site header and the menu bar, so it's based on our default template.
And do those scroll out of view when you scroll down to editor?
No, I don't think so.
I can't remember.
I think the default for a code mirror div is that the div itself is scrollable.
Okay. Well, yeah. We so the issue with that is it strongly affects printing. And we'll have to think about that stuff. But I mean, we'll just have to iterate on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that printing
the single file editor is.
Yeah, maybe it's not that big.
Because the print view could just open the file.
Yeah.
From the files API.
Okay. I guess we just need to review this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just letting everybody know that we're chugging right along.
Okay. Great.
Or Thomas is anyway.
I mean, Thomas.
I'm floundering in Tornado 3 and Phantom garbage, but Thomas is moving right along. Okay.
Brian, sorry, you were just asking me something.
Oh, well, do you have any questions from us about this at this point?
No. Especially, I can think there's one or two more things that I know I need to do with it, like Control S ought to do real save rather than browser try to save this HTML, which is useless as it is in the notebook. But yeah, other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward.
So
So the contents name path, what's that one?
Yeah, so something that's been bothering me for a while is so when I did the contents manager, I didn't change any of the APIs. I just take notebook manager, rename it contents manager, and let it handle files that aren't notebooks.
Yep.
But because of directories and files being interchangeable, it doesn't really make sense anymore that path and name are separate.
Yeah.
So I have a PR that basically removes name from the API. It's still there when you get something. So when you get it, it makes path the full path.
Right.
So the path for a notebook is,
Just the path.
A, B, C, notebook.ipynb.
Yep.
And then the name is still there in the model for convenience, but it's not used. It has no effect on any API. So if you and it means that there are all these methods that take name and path, and they should only take path.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with that. I'm wondering if it makes sense to remove name from the model, but I don't really care.
So part of this was based on looking at the GitHub content service.
Oh, okay. So that
they also have name just for convenience because JavaScript has no rsplit.
Oh, okay. No, absolutely.
So getting the name, I had to write a stupid little rsplit in shells.
I've also got an implementation of that in the text editor PR with a comment saying remove this once Mins changes to the contents API land.
Oh, okay. No, then leave. I like the idea of it being there.
So the name is there for convenience. The pretty much all of the APIs just use path. So like when you post to do a rename, you change the path. You don't need to put name in there at all. It will be ignored.
Gotcha.
So name is strictly a redundant convenience key for readers of data. It's never used by internally. The things that have gotten sticky when doing this, and I remember them being sticky the first time around, is copy. So right now, you can create notebooks. You can create untitled notebooks in directories with post, and you can create named notebooks with a specific path with put.
Absolutely.
And those can have the source, the data in that file can come, in both of those cases, in master, can come from 3 places. One, it's an upload. So you actually have the content of the file in the request.
Right.
2, it's an empty file, which in the case of notebooks means it calls new notebook.
Correct.
So it creates an empty notebook, but with valid notebook content.
Yep.
And 3, it's a copy of a file from somewhere else.
Right.
And this is kind of problematic. Well, the varying degrees of problematic for these things. One, I'm not sure why we care. I'm not sure it makes sense to do untitled upload. Post with content.
Yeah, no, and this is where, I remember all the discussions with Zach about like what makes sense, and I'm not sure. We in our web application only use very few of those 6 options.
Yeah, we use new untitled. So we
Yep.
use create empty with post.
Yep.
Copy with post. So
Put.
copy untitled, create untitled, and upload with a name.
Yeah.
So we never copy with the name. We never copy to a specific file. We never upload untitled. I don't
And
remember
we
what the other.
we never create a new one with a specific name.
Right. And so I've actually copy's the hardest one, the one that really, in part because at a high level, copy to a file and copy to a directory both make sense. But we strongly distinguish post and put. For you post to directories, you put to files. So you have to know ahead of where this really comes up is now that we have a JavaScript API for the content service.
Yeah.
If you do content, if you have JavaScript.copy, and we support copying to files and folders, it needs to know whether you're copying to a file or a folder before it makes the REST request, because it's going to be a different request, because it needs to be a put or a post.
Well, but actually, so my understanding of the different, like in the traditional REST API setting, the difference between put and post is not the directories versus files. It's basically a difference between the server deciding on the name of the final name / path of the resource, or the maker of the request deciding on that. And so that's why an untitled notebook is something the server gets to decide on, and that's a post. Whereas a put is something that is the person making, or the code making the put request knows exactly the location in the hierarchy that goes, and it's a known thing. And so I think the same is true of directories, that if you want an untitled directory...
No, when Min says copy directory, that's what he means. He means copy something into a directory, and the server picks the name within that directory.
Yeah, so whether the server picks the name or not is whether... So
it's put or post.
We're not talking about copying the directory itself. We're talking about copying a file, and it's whether you copy that to a named location, or whether you copy that into a directory and let the server pick the name within that. And my take on it is that those shouldn't be the same API. It's a convenience, I think, at the command line that you can do both of those things with CP, and it works out magically what you want. But I think for an actual API, I think that's more confusing than helpful.
Yeah, so what I've actually done in the PR is remove upload untitled.
Which was a post.
Yeah, a post with actual content.
Okay.
Just because I pick a name for your file. I can't imagine ever using that.
Yeah,
it was kind of jumping through hoops for symmetry that didn't.
I think that's fine.
That didn't really make sense. And the other, I removed copying to a specific file name, so you can only copy with post. And the reason being that copy to a specific location is trivially copy to a directory and then rename.
Or indeed, if you don't care about efficiency, get and save.
But why? I mean, the rename still has to happen as a put, right?
The rename is patch.
Patch. I don't know. It's so.
The other option is to make copy just a totally different.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's.
Honestly, I think where this is gonna, the only way we're really gonna know the best way of doing these things is if and when we have a dashboard that supports all these actions.
Yeah.
And until then, I think what you're saying is perfectly reasonable. I don't know. I think.
Maybe, maybe there's a I'm just thinking about, we were talking about other ways of doing this. Maybe operations that move and copy files around should all be patch requests to the directory. Because if you're not saying modify the contents of this file, you're saying do something with the files in this directory.
If you are saying create a file for copy, you're saying create a file.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. But
no, but it would clarify some things.
Yeah.
I'll finish up and then what I have to know, and we can.
Yeah. No, and we shouldn't. I mean, what I looked around, well, at least a while ago, to find information like what are best practices in REST APIs for basically move and copy operations.
Mm-hmm. And usually just don't have them.
I found no good references, and,
Yeah.
and I think this is part of the reason why is that it's not a. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, and there's this single way that is completely consistent within the REST abstraction. So,
okay. Well, I'll just plug it. I've got it mostly working. I just need to get JavaScript tests to pass and things.
okay. I was wondering if you wanted to give us a short update on Jupyter Hub Min.
It's working pretty well. I guess we need to do some design stuff. I still haven't done any design things. Matthias opened a PR before we had done any design on the main page, but
Okay.
maybe I'll finish that up.
Okay, and then please work with Adrian on any of that. You've seen the issue that's open where she's done some drafts of some of that.
Yeah, it's it does require Python 3.3 and IPython 3. So there's that. A bunch of Unicode bugs went away, which is nice. Or Unicode warnings, I should say. Been getting help from Scott Sanderson at Quantopian with some database stuff, since he's using a Postgres database. So there are fewer database operations, there's less information stored in the database, there's no sensitive information stored in the database, that kind of thing.
Okay. And then are the database operations still blocking at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that doesn't really bother me because since the hub really only does login, once you're logged into your server, it will never make another request to the database to the hub again.
Okay.
It's really not that important that the hub be super performant on
Great.
the database because it's the login process is all that.
Okay. No, that's great that Scott's been helping out with that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wait, that's that. Phosphor.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention to folks that Chris Colbert has created a separate GitHub org for Phosphor and has permission and is in the process of open sourcing the app framework as well. So there's I pasted the org there, and we can sort of watch that and sort of see what happens with that. So I think that's a good step.
Cool.
So just a question: are we having regular Tuesday meetings now, or what's?
When we have something extra to talk about.
Okay, so it's something we would explicitly schedule.
Yeah, so like if you wanna have an extensive widget discussion or a Jupyter Hub discussion or something, that's kind of what we're doing. What Tuesdays for.
And then also, if we need to have any shorter meetings to the needs decision PRs, just let's do that as needed.
Okay.
All right. Well, anything else?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Actually, Jess, I was gonna. Do you want to talk briefly about NB Grader?
Sure.
Yeah. So want to update us on what you've been working on in the last week?
Yeah. Well, so I think both Thomas and Min have seen kind of the new version of stuff. Like things have changed a little bit since then, but not a ton. But for everyone else, the idea behind Integrator is now. So before we had just like a notebook extension that would allow you to create assignments, and now we've added support for actually grading them. So you can run the auto grader on them, which will go through the notebook and execute all of the cells, and it'll save. So when you created the assignment, you marked certain cells as being grade cells and like say that they have a certain point value. And so as the auto grader is going through, it will say for those cells that if it passed with no errors, then they get the number of points you had set. Otherwise, they get 0 points. And all of this is saved into MongoDB. And then I built a web interface to actually then go and look at what those scores were, override them if you think that the auto grader was wrong or you want to give partial credit, and to also grade written answers, which can't be auto graded. So it's
you haven't built an auto grading AI.
Sorry.
You mean you haven't built an auto grading AI that can
not yet. That's you know, it's on the to-do list, but
2.0.
Yeah.
So I was talking to someone this last week, and they said that for grading like a narrative content, there's a number of different metrics that you can run on narrative text to characterize it. Like you can compute the grade level and things like that. And they were saying it'd be nice to eventually add that type of thing.
That would be super cool. I actually I was showing what I had yesterday to the other people who are teaching the class with me next semester, and one of the requests was to be able to do auto grading of like really simple written answers. So maybe that's like an easier version of that. But I'm not sure like how feasible it is exactly, but it would be stuff like you expect it to be like 2 words or something, and then you can check like a set of like canned answers. But in any case, yeah, it's starting to come together as a full-fledged system that you can actually use to create, release, you know, and then grade assignments. Yeah, so I think like the next steps are sort of trying to make it a little bit more robust. So like currently there's nothing, you know, that checks to make sure people haven't changed like the test cells. So like they could just remove all of the tests and then they would get full credit currently. If you go and like check to see that they hadn't done that. So, you know, things like that are sort of, I think, some of the important stuff to be working on next.
Okay. And then, so I saw that you have a pull request that was going to be merged here that allows the auto grading stuff to work across a set of subdirectories.
Yeah.
And then what, if you thought any more about how you would send back the comments and the graded work to the students?
So I'm not sure. I think for my class, what's probably going to be easiest is to just like take. So the way that the form grader works is it converts it to HTML and then just inserts like text boxes in certain places. And so to have like a template that's really similar to that template, but instead of a text box, it just like includes whatever the score is, and then it could do like one big score at the top, and then give them those HTML files. I don't know, like maybe it would be better to give them something more like a PDF or something, because then the HTML files might depend on the images. I'm not really sure. I think, Brian, what are you thinking for your class? Like, do you have something you feel is going to work better for yours?
I don't know. I mean, I've even thought about just sending them an email that summarizes their score in the email and the comments in the email without even trying to put the actual notebook there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer to it.
Maybe we can try like experimenting with both things, or well, you probably want to do something consistent for your class, but
No, but I mean, it's all experimental. I mean, I do. I mean, I do have some code that I mean, I'll start to play around with NB Grader that manages some aspects of the communication of with students through email. And so, I mean, I think it could be possible that running NB Grader triggers emails to be sent or something like that. I mean, because even you know, sending 50 separate emails to 50 students that contain their grades is pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And so I right now I just have a simple Python function that can send email through Gmail. So it's a really simple thing. No, but I mean, in the next week I'm going to be basically using this to grade some assignments and things, and I'm sure I'll be in touch with you about things and just see how it goes. I mean, it'll be a really fun experiment to see how this works for real.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that definitely like feedback on if you're going to be using like the recursive features and stuff, that because I think it's like not perfect, and probably like it would be good to think a little bit harder about so like you want to be able to run like the auto grader and stuff without like it being in a particular directory structure, but then when you run the form grader, like that is pulling its information from the database, and so it like needs. Like, I don't want to say, like, put in the database, this is the path to this file, because then what if the file moves? But then if the form grader has to know where that file is in order to, like, convert it to HTML and display it. So there's, like, kind of a synchronization issue there that I'm not really sure what the best solution is for that. But I think that these are all, like, things we can kind of, like, hammer out as we're using it and figure out what's best.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we can definitely iterate on that. But no, it's great. I mean, this is going to be a huge improvement for all of us. So thanks so much for working on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to make grading way better.
and how many students in the class you'll be teaching coming up?
Probably at least 150.
Oh wow. Okay, so you're really going to test this at scale.
Yeah.
And how many graders and TAs and so on are there?
There's 3 GSIs, TAs, including myself, and then we'll probably hire people just for grading as well. Maybe like 1 or 2 people just to help with the grading. A lot of the stuff that we have is written answers, so, and that's really what, like, provided the auto grading works well, like that is going to, like the amount of time that will take is kind of negligible. Compared to grading the written answers, but so providing a framework to like make it easy to grade the written answers.
Right. So in that context, how are you thinking of managing the grading across all the different graders? Like, are you going to have them each run NB Grader separately, or run it centrally, or?
Probably I would run it centrally, and then like everyone would have access to a server, and then like just assign each person a different problem, and then they grade just the assignments for that problem.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one. Do you think you're going to be using Jupyter Hub for this?
Yeah.
So one thing, I mean, and this is where we could think about ways of deploying NB Grader behind the Jupyter Hub proxy so that all the auth just magically works. That I mean it would I don't know. I mean it's something to think about. We'd have to sort of think about how we want to do all that, but that is a possibility.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna talk more with Kyle about some of the Jupyter Hub stuff soon, and I think once we start having those conversations, like we can start working through some of this stuff too.
Okay, yeah, because definitely, I mean, I'm not using Jupyter Hub right now, but I think in the future I definitely will be, and having, you know, a strong integration between NBGrader and Jupyter Hub. You know,
Yeah.
I think it definitely makes sense. It's
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and everyone have a good day. Bye bye, internet.
Bye, Internet.
Bye.